So in my 10 years of filmmaking, out of all the camera bodies that I've had the privilege of trying, and I haven't had a chance to try many because I'm on a budget just like most of y'all. So when it comes to the A7 III, I can confidently say it's probably one of the most popular, most talked about, and most sought after cameras in the hybrid photo and video space when it comes to YouTube and pretty much any other type of content out there. And of course, we're in 2024, so many people have outgrown this camera, and there's bodies that have came out to kind of upgrade from this camera, like the A7S III, A7 IV, as well as the FX30 and FX3. But in regards to the A7 III, we're going to be talking about whether it's a viable camera in 2024, why I still think it's a very good Swiss Army knife type of a camera, very one size fits all for anyone looking to get started in 2024. But whether I should buy it is another question, and we'll get into that later on in this video. But before we get into all that, if you guys are new here, my name is DaVinci HD, where we talk cameras, cinema, and pretty much anything else to do with filmmaking. Definitely appreciate you guys stopping by the video, so let's get into it. So the Sony A7 III is a 24 megapixel full frame mirrorless camera that was originally released in 2018. Some of the most notable features that this camera is boasting is 693 phase detection autofocus points, 10 frames per second continuous shooting along with 4K video capability, along with a 5-axis image stabilization inside the camera body itself. This camera does support recording in various formats including AVCS, AVC HD, and MP4. The A7 III also supports multiple recording resolutions. It can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second and can shoot 1080p HD up to 120 frames per second, which for a camera in 2024, it can pretty much do everything you need as far as content creation is concerned. Now, I've had this camera for a few months now. I actually got it from the editor that I work for as far as weddings, so I've been able to put this camera through its paces as far as, of course, shooting weddings, music videos, fitness content, as well as various pictures and photo sessions, to be able to put this camera through its paces in 2024 to really see what it can do for someone who's looking to either get started in filmmaking, or if they're looking to upgrade to a full frame camera, and whether this camera will be the right choice for them. So we're gonna get into some pros and cons, and then we're gonna get into my use case for this camera and whether I'd recommend it. So getting into some of the pros, starting off with, like I said before, this camera does have a 24 megapixel full frame sensor, allowing you to capture amazing still images with this camera. The second pro with this camera is going to have to be the low light performance. Filming weddings and music videos with this camera, depending on the lens you have, I've been able to push the ISO on this camera as high as about 6,000 and 8,000 ISO and still have a usable image. This isn't an ISO setting that I would use often. In low light situations, I would strongly recommend getting external lighting or being able to find a more natural light source. But in a pinch, I was able to boost my ISO levels and be able to still get a usable image out of the camera. Another pro about this camera is going to have to be the 693 phase detection autofocus points. It's tack sharp when it comes to that. You won't be missing focus anytime soon when it comes to Sony E-mount lenses. You will have some problems sometimes with the face detection if you slap on a monitor and you're trying to shoot in 4K, but that's something you're going to have to experiment with, and there's other videos talking about that, so I won't go into a big spiel here. Another pro about this camera is going to have to be the E-mount lens system that this camera uses. There's a wide range of compatible lenses from various different brands that you can choose from a wide range of focal lengths with a huge amount of primes that you can get your hands on, some at affordable prices, some a little bit more expensive. I do have a lens that I use on this camera right now. I'm using the 18-105 f4. Not the most optimal lens to use on this camera, but useful for the content that I'm using it for. So I just keep it on there and stay in APS-C mode, then I'm able to get everything just fine. So some of the cons with this camera, that's going to have to be the limited touchscreen functionality. About the only thing that I could do with this camera, as long as I'm not in 4K mode, I think I can do like spot focus or something like that. But as far as being able to use the touchscreen to guide through and navigate the menu system and things like that. That stuff isn't there. If it's there and I missed it, then put it in the comment section and maybe I can correct it in another video. But from my experience and use case with this camera, the only thing that really worked as far as the touchscreen when it came to the LCD is going to be the spot focus. That leads me into another con about this camera, is going to be the convoluted menu system. It does take a while to get used to. I've used Sony cameras before, back when I had the a6300, which I have a review on. You can go check that out if you want to go look at that. But basically, make a long story short, Sony is notorious for having very, very complicated menu systems to navigate through. With some of the newer cameras, they've kind of corrected that a little bit, but if you're looking at the A7 III or anything older than that, you are going to have to deal with that menu system. Another con with this camera is going to have to be going back to the LCD screen. So it has a limited tilting functionality. You can only kind of tilt it out. There's no articulating screen like there is on the GH5 or the FX30 or FX3 or even the A7S III, from what I understand. Which for somebody like me who's a mainly video shooter, that's going to be kind of a deal breaker for a lot of guys who are looking to have the most functionality out of their camera and have a little bit of versatility when it comes to vlogging and things of that nature. Now I'm going to get into a con about this camera that I kind of touched on as a pro, but I'm going to have to really kind of back myself and really correct what I said there. So there are a wide range of lenses for this camera, and there are inexpensive options as far as lenses for this camera, but for the most part, lenses are relatively expensive for this camera. Even now at $70 to $200 for this camera is going to run you about $800, even on eBay. So keep that in mind when it comes to this camera. There are expensive lenses when it comes to getting the full frame capability out of this camera. And like I said, I've used this camera in multiple situations, weddings, music videos, corporate shots, portrait photography, outdoor photography. I've put this thing probably through the most amount of paces that I can put it through before I could give you an honest review and tell you whether I could recommend this camera. And to be honest, in 2024, while this camera would be the best camera that you could probably ask for when it comes to being a hybrid shooter or even starting out in photography, I would have to not recommend this camera starting out, because for a camera that came out in 2018 and for there to be cameras like the FX30 that are out there right now for $1,600, even though that's an APS-C camera, you're still able to get 4K 60 out of that camera, which is something that is really another con in the A7 III, is that you can't shoot 4K 60 frames per second, which in my workflow for what I do is very, very important for being able to have slow motion in my footage. Also, if I was to compare this camera to something like my GH5 that I also use for weddings on occasion, the in-body stabilization is better in that camera. You're also able to shoot 4K 60 in that camera. The only downside that I would say the GH5 has to this camera is the fact that the sensor is very much smaller. You're dealing with a micro four thirds sensor in the GH5 compared to a full frame sensor, so you're getting a 2x crop in that instead of getting the full sensor in full range out of the A7 III. So all in all, great camera if you can get your hands on it in 2024. It wouldn't be a camera I would recommend spending your money on. I feel like you could save a couple dollars and get yourself something a little bit better in the Sony range, or if you're wanting to get a more bang for your buck, save a couple dollars, get yourself something like the GH5, but you're going to sacrifice some low light and some autofocus capability with that. So if you made it this far, I definitely appreciate it. And if you found anything in this video helpful, definitely hit that like button, hit the subscribe, put a comment in the comment section, let me know which part of the video helped you the most. This is DaVinci HD reminding you guys that the only reason you haven't made that piece of content that you want to make is because you haven't pressed record.